I'm going to use fake names and a throwaway account here because I don't want anyone I know to find this. I'm Chris, 37 years old, working as a financial analyst. I've done pretty well for myself, and I've got a good career going at a solid firm. Family has always been important to me, and I've been the responsible older brother for as long as I can remember. Growing up, my younger brother Ryan and I were tight. We were opposites in a lot of ways, me being the steady one, and Ryan being the wild child who couldn't resist a good time, but that never got in the way of our bond. Ryan was a troublemaker, but he had a good heart. He had this way of getting into the most ridiculous situations, but he was always there for me when it mattered. And even though he never seemed to take life as seriously as I did, I loved him like crazy. Then there's Chelsea. She's 35 now, and we were married for 7 years. On the outside, it seemed like we had a pretty good thing going. No kids, by choice, but we had a nice life together. Or so I thought. Everything changed the day my brother, Ryan, died. It was a motorcycle accident, one of those freak things that you never see coming until it's too late. I got the call when I was at work, and I'll never forget the way my heart just stopped. They told me to get to the hospital, and I drove there in a daze, praying the whole time that it wasn't as bad as it sounded. When I arrived, I was met with the kind of scene you only see in nightmares. The doctors told me Ryan had lost control of his bike and hit a guardrail. He was gone before the ambulance even got there. They let me see him, but I could barely recognize him under all the bandages and tubes. They had to amputate both his legs as they were barely holding on. I just stood there, staring, trying to convince myself it wasn't real. But it was. My parents were inconsolable. My mom, especially, kept asking over and over, why him? Why my baby? My dad, who had always been this strong figure, just crumpled and was crying while trying to calm my mother down. I felt like I had to hold it together for them, to be the strong one, but inside, I was falling apart. Chelsea was there, too. She held my hand and said all the right things, tried to comfort me in all the right ways. At the time, I was grateful. I thought she was a good wife. After Ryan's death, I wasn't myself. I shut down emotionally and threw myself into making sure everything was taken care of. I handled the funeral arrangements, helped my parents navigate their grief, and tried to keep everything from falling apart. I didn't have the energy for anything else. The funeral was a blur. I remember standing by Ryan's casket, numb, as people came up to offer their condolences. I was too exhausted to feel anything, let alone think about how this was affecting Chelsea. I was completely consumed by my grief and my need to be there for my parents. I didn't realize how much I was pulling away from Chelsea. I spent most of my time at my parents' house in the weeks after the funeral. They needed me, and I needed them. Chelsea tried to get me to come home, to talk about what I was feeling, but I just couldn't. I couldn't let myself feel anything more than I was already feeling. It was like my grief was this huge weight that I had to carry, and I couldn't share it with anyone, not even her. After a few months, I started to claw my way back to some semblance of normalcy. I went back to work, trying to get my life back on track. But things between Chelsea and me were different. I knew it, and she knew it. The distance that had grown between us during those months after Ryan's death, but I was so wrapped up in my grief that I didn't know how to fix it. I tried, though. I really did. I made an effort to reconnect with Chelsea, to get back to the way things were before everything went to hell. But she was different, too. She was distant, cold even. Whenever I tried to talk to her about what was going on, she would brush me off or change the subject. It was like she had put up this wall between us, and I couldn't figure out how to break it down. There were times when she'd be on her phone late at night, and when I'd ask who she was talking to, she'd get defensive and tell me it was just a friend. She started going out more often, saying she needed space, that she was just trying to clear her head. I wanted to believe her, but something about it didn't sit right with me. One night, a few months after I started noticing her strange behavior, I was home alone and saw her phone buzzing on the table. She was in the shower, and without really thinking about it, I picked it up to check who was texting her. That's when I saw it, a message from someone named Mark. The content was explicit, to say the least. I took screenshots, videos of the conversations, and saved them on my own phone. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, but I needed to be sure. The next day, I hired a private investigator. It felt surreal, like something out of a bad movie, but I needed to know the truth. I needed to know if it was just a few texts or if it was something more. A few days later, the PI confirmed my worst fears. Chelsea was having an affair with this guy, Mark. They'd been seeing each other for months. When I confronted Chelsea, she denied everything at first. She acted offended, like I was the one betraying her by going through her phone. But I wasn't having any of it. I showed her the screenshots, the photos, everything. She just sat there, staring at the evidence, and then she broke down. She admitted it, all of it. She said she felt isolated and neglected, that I was too caught up in my grief to pay attention to her. She said she tried to connect with me, but I kept pushing her away. And maybe she was right about that last part. I had been pushing her away, but I never thought she'd turn to someone else. I thought she'd understand that I needed time. She told me she met Mark at a bar one night when I was staying over at my parents' place. She said she felt lonely, that he was there for her in a way I wasn't, and one thing led to another. I didn't want to hear any more after that. The betrayal was too much. I said some things, some awful things, about her not being able to keep her legs closed while I was mourning my brother. She fired back, saying I was an emotional void, that she didn't know how to reach me anymore. It was ugly. The whole thing was just ugly. I couldn't stay in that house with her after that. I packed a bag and moved back in with my parents. They were shocked when I told them what happened. I think they were more disappointed than anything else. Chelsea tried to reach out to me, to apologize, to explain, but I was done. There was no going back from this. I told my friends, our mutual friends, what happened. I didn't care how it made her look, I wanted everyone to know what she did. And honestly, a part of me wanted her to feel ashamed, to feel the pain she caused me. She tried to apologize over and over, but I couldn't forgive her. Not after what she'd done. She destroyed whatever we had left of our marriage the moment she decided to cheat on me. Divorce was inevitable. We hired lawyers, and the whole thing turned nasty pretty quickly. We fought over everything, money, the house, even the stupid little things like who would keep the furniture. Chelsea tried to claim alimony, saying she deserved it because she was used to a certain lifestyle, but I wasn't about to let her take any more from me than she already had. At one point, I found out she had drained our joint account. She said it was because she needed money to live, but I knew it was just another way for her to screw me over. My lawyer fought back hard, and in the end, we settled. I got to keep most of my assets, but the whole process left me drained, emotionally, financially, and mentally. Chelsea wasn't content with just making my life hell through the divorce. She started showing up at my office, causing scenes, begging me to take her back. She'd cry in the lobby until security had to escort her out. My coworkers, who had always respected me, started whispering behind my back. It was humiliating. I had to go to HR to keep her away from my workplace. It was like she wanted to ruin every part of my life she could. After the divorce was finalized, I tried to move on with my life. I went on a few dates, but nothing ever felt right. I was too hurt, and too angry to even think about starting something new. My friends told me I needed to get back out there, but I just wasn't ready. I threw myself into my work instead. I put in long hours, took on extra projects, anything to keep my mind off what had happened. Slowly, I started to heal. The anger began to fade, and the hurt started to scab over. I knew I'd never forget what Chelsea did to me, but I was determined not to let it define the rest of my life. From what I heard through the mutual friends, things didn't go so well for Chelsea after the divorce. Mark, the guy she had the affair with, took off as soon as she told him she was pregnant. I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction when I found out. Karma, I thought. She struggled with being a single mom. Financially, things were rough for her after the divorce. She lost the house and had to move into a small apartment. She tried to reach out to me for help, but I ignored her. I wasn't going to be her savior after what she did to me. She made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. 3 years have passed since the divorce, and a lot has changed. My career has taken off. I got promoted to a senior management position, which came with a hefty raise and a nice corner office. I've started seeing someone new, Becca, 33F. She's kind, understanding, and everything Chelsea wasn't. We've been together for almost a year now, and things are going great. But then, a few weeks ago, something happened that threw me off balance. A mutual friend of ours was getting married, and I got an invite to the wedding. I debated whether or not to go, but Becca convinced me it would be good to show up, have some fun, and see some old friends. So, I decided to go. I wasn't expecting to see Chelsea there. As soon as I walked into the reception, there she was, standing by the bar. She had lost a lot of weight, and there was this sadness about her that I hadn't seen before. Our eyes met, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. Then she started walking towards me. She asked if we could talk, and against my better judgment, I agreed. We found a quiet corner, and she started telling me about how hard things had been for her. She talked about how much she regretted what she did, how Mark abandoned her, how difficult it was to raise a child on her own. She apologized again, saying she knew she had no right to ask for my forgiveness, but she needed to try. She even started bringing up memories from our marriage, the good times, as if trying to remind me of what we once had. It was like she was grasping at straws, desperate to find some way to connect with me again. But all I could think about was the betrayal. As she talked, I couldn't help but have flashbacks to the day I found out about the affair, but then I looked over at Becca, who was watching us from across the room, and I realized that I had moved on. I wasn't the same person I was 3 years ago. I'd built a new life, found happiness again, and I wasn't about to let Chelsea pull me back into that dark place. I told Chelsea that I couldn't reconcile with her. That too much had happened, too much damage had been done. I told her I was happy now, that I had moved on and that she needed to do the same. She tried to argue, saying she had changed, that she could be better, but I stood firm. I wasn't going to let her back into my life. She cried and started to beg, causing a scene. People at the wedding began to notice. But I didn't care. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into feeling guilty for something she brought on herself. After the wedding, Becca and I talked about what happened. She was supportive, understanding, and she didn't push me to talk about anything I wasn't ready to. I told her about Chelsea's attempts to reconcile, and she just held my hand and told me she was proud of how I handled it. Since then, Chelsea has tried to contact me a few more times, but I've ignored her. I have no interest in reopening old wounds. I've set boundaries, and I intend to keep them. I've moved on, and I'm not looking back. Here's the part that's really throwing me off right now. Last week, I got a letter from Chelsea. In it, she told me that she believes her child might actually be mine. She said she didn't want to believe it herself, but the timing lines up, and she wants me to take a DNA test to find out for sure. I don't know what to do. Part of me thinks this is just another one of her manipulations, another way to try and force her way back into my life. But if there's even a small chance that this kid is mine, I feel like I have a responsibility to know. So, that's where I'm at right now. I'm trying to figure out my next move. I never imagined I'd be in this situation, and I'm not sure how to handle it. If anyone has been through something similar or has any advice, I'm all ears. Thanks for reading. I'll update when I know more. Final update. Hey Reddit, it's Chris again. First off, I want to thank everyone who took the time to read my previous posts and offer advice. I was overwhelmed by the support and the different perspectives you all shared. It really helped me to think things through during what has been one of the most stressful times in my life. I'm here to give you the final update on this whole saga, and I hope this brings some closure to anyone who's been following along. To recap briefly, a few years ago, my wife Chelsea cheated on me while I was grieving my brother's death, and we divorced after a nasty legal battle. I've since moved on and am in a happy relationship with Becca. But recently, at a mutual friend's wedding, Chelsea reappeared and tried to reconcile. Then she dropped a bombshell, claiming her child might be mine and requested a DNA test. After Chelsea's DNA request, I was extremely confused. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as just another one of her manipulative tactics, but the possibility that I might be a father was too big to ignore. I couldn't just sweep it under the rug. Becca and I had a long conversation about it. She was supportive, but I could tell she was worried about what this would mean for us. I tried to reassure her, but the truth is, I was just as worried. I also consulted with a lawyer to make sure I was covering all my bases. He advised me to go ahead with the DNA test but to do it through a neutral third party to ensure everything was above board. That way, there could be no accusations of tampering or bias. We set up the test, and I tried to brace myself for whatever the results might show. The waiting period for the test results was brutal. Becca and I started to feel the strain almost immediately. There was this unspoken tension between us. Every time my phone rang, I felt a lot of anxiety, wondering if it was Chelsea or the lab with the results. Chelsea, meanwhile, started ramping up her attempts to contact me. She'd text me constantly, asking if I'd heard anything, making comments about how I should prepare to step up as a father. It got to the point where I had to block her number just to keep my sanity. But even then, she found ways to get to me, whether it was through mutual friends or even showing up at my office again. I was already on edge, and her constant harassment only made things worse. My work started to suffer, I couldn't focus, couldn't think straight. It was like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Just when I thought the stress couldn't get any worse, there was an unexpected delay with the lab. Apparently, there was some mix-up with the samples, and it was going to take longer than expected to get the results. When I found out, I felt like I was going to explode. Chelsea, of course, took this opportunity to accuse me of trying to tamper with the results. She sent me a series of nasty messages, saying that I was trying to avoid my responsibilities, that I was scared of the truth. It was all nonsense, but it got under my skin. The stress was taking a toll on me, and I started snapping at people at work, even at Becca. I could feel myself becoming a bitter person, and I didn't know how to stop it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the results came in. I was at work when I got the email, and I couldn't even wait until I got home. I opened it right then and there. And there it was, in black and white, I was not the father. I felt relieved, but it was mixed with so many other emotions. Anger at Chelsea for putting me through this, sadness for the child who was being used as a pawn in her games, and frustration that it had taken so long to get to this point. When I told Chelsea about the results, she didn't take it well. At first, she tried to deny it, saying the test must have been tampered with, that the lab had made a mistake. She accused me of somehow rigging the results, which was absurd considering we'd gone through a neutral third party. But she wasn't hearing any of it. She was desperate, and it showed. After a few days of back and forth, where she kept insisting on a retest, she finally seemed to accept the reality. But instead of apologizing or backing off, she just doubled down on her accusations. She started telling people that I was a deadbeat, that I was abandoning my child even though I knew the truth. It was all lies, but it didn't stop her from spreading them. My lawyer advised me to take legal action to protect myself from any further harassment. We sent Chelsea a cease and desist order, demanding that she stop contacting me and spreading false information. We also started talking about the possibility of a restraining order if she didn't back off. I didn't want to go down that road, but it was becoming clear that I might not have a choice. Chelsea, predictably, didn't take the cease and desist seriously. She continued to try to contact me, and she even showed up at my office again, demanding to speak with me. At that point, I knew I had to take the next step. My lawyer is currently working on getting a restraining order in place to keep her away from me, my home, and my workplace. It's not what I wanted, but it's what I need to do to protect myself. This whole ordeal has taken a toll on my relationship with Becca. She's been amazing throughout all of this, but I could tell that it was starting to wear on her, too. We had a long heart-to-heart the other night, where she admitted that she was feeling insecure and scared about our future. She worried that this situation with Chelsea was going to keep coming back to haunt us. I understood where she was coming from, and I told her as much. I reassured her that I was committed to us, that I wasn't going to let Chelsea ruin what we have. But I also acknowledged that this had been incredibly hard on both of us, and that we needed to keep communicating if we were going to get through it together. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was necessary, and I think it helped us both to feel more secure moving forward. My parents were devastated when they heard about everything that had been going on. They had always liked Chelsea, and while they were disappointed in her after the affair, this new level of manipulation shocked them. My mom was especially upset. She couldn't believe that someone we once considered family could stoop so low. My dad actually got angry when I told him about Chelsea's accusations and the DNA test. He said he always thought there was something off about her, but he never imagined she'd go this far. It's been hard for them, too, seeing their son go through all of this, and I know they've been struggling to process it. As for our mutual friends, things have been strained, to say the least. Some of them have distanced themselves from Chelsea, especially after hearing about the DNA test and her continued harassment. But others seem to be caught in the middle, unsure of what to believe. It's been a tough situation all around, and I've had to accept that some friendships might not survive this. Emotionally, I'm still processing everything that's happened. The betrayal, the manipulation, the stress, it's all been a lot to handle. I never wanted things to get this ugly, but I also know that none of this is my fault. One thing that's been particularly hard to deal with is the guilt I feel over the child's situation. Even though I'm not the father, I can't help but feel bad for the kid. They didn't ask to be born into this mess, and they're the real victim here. I know I can't do anything about it, but it's something that's been weighing on me. In the end, I've decided to completely cut ties with Chelsea. There's no point in trying to maintain any kind of relationship with someone who has caused this much damage. I've blocked her on all fronts, and I'm moving forward with the legal actions necessary to keep her out of my life for good. I'm incredibly grateful for the support I've received from everyone here on Reddit. Your advice, encouragement, and even your tough love have helped me to see things more clearly and to make decisions that are right for me. Thanks again, everyone. I'll keep moving forward, and I hope this post can be the end of this saga. Take care.